Guys, we are back. Good evening, good morning, or good afternoon. As always, it is so great to see you. And friends, I've been working with the Sony A1 for about a month now, and I have to say, guys, this is really one heck of a camera. In fact, there's a long list of specs and features that have really impressed me about using this camera. But it's not all sunshine and roses either. The A1 is by no means a perfect camera, and there are a few things that have really left me kind of scratch my head a little bit. And then we'll jump into discussing the pros and cons of the A1 in just a minute. But first, I gotta do it every single video, of course, because we are trying to grow this channel. So of course, I'm gonna ask you, if this video is helpful, if you find some value with this video, do me a favor, hit that like button. It takes a fraction of a second doing it, but it really does help out a lot with the whole YouTube algorithm. It tells YouTube algorithm that this video is helpful. YouTube's gonna share this video with more people, getting more people aware of this channel. So my friend, a big thank you in advance. That said, pull up a seat in, let's go. Now, before I reveal my pros and cons list, let's have a quick look at some of the specs of the A1. 50.1 megapixel stacked full-frame back illuminated exmor RS sensor, dual Bianzi XR processor, up to 30 frames per second continuous shooting with electronic shutter, up to 10 frames per second with the mechanical shutter. 5-axis sensor shaft IBIS, ISO range from 100 to 32,000. That is expandable to 50 to 102,400. 759 phase detect autofocus points, along with 425 contrast detection autofocus points. 10-bit UHD 8K recording up to 30p. 10-bit UHD 4K recording at up to 120p. 9.437 million dot EVF. 3-inch tilting screen LCD with 1.44 million dots resolution. Dual memory card slots, both of which are CF Express Type A SD. Takes a FZ100 battery, which is rated for up to about 530 shots. Built-in Wi-Fi, other connectivity includes ports for USB 3.2, HDMI, microphone, and headphone. The dimensions are 5.07 by 3.81 by 2.74 inches in size. This thing weighs 1.6 pounds. Now that's just for the body by itself. And of course, this is a weathered sealed body at around $6,498 for the retail for this thing. Now you may be looking at that list of features and you're probably guessing what are going to be some of the A1 pros and cons. So let's get to that list. While I don't shoot a lot of portraits and I don't shoot a lot of people, I'm mainly a landscape photographer, but it's one thing I can really appreciate. So when I do go out there, so for example, many of you know I have a 6-year-old son. Most of the photos that I take are of him, and there's nothing worse because he's bouncing all over the place. He's running. He is a good example of how to test an autofocus system, a eye autofocus detected or face detect. This camera really does a good job. He's bouncing around, he's turning around. This thing locks on very fast. And another thing, when I'm out there in front of the camera like this, now granted, I'm only about 2 feet away from the lens itself. This thing really does lock onto my face, lock on my eyes very, very good. Sony did a really good job on that, and I figured let's lead, because a lot of you folks are maybe buying this for portraits or sports. If you're with sports, you want something that is fast and locking on onto your subject that may be moving pretty fast. This camera's gonna do it for you. Now, one of the best features about the Sony A1 is the image quality. I mean, it's hard to go wrong with the combination of a 50.1 megapixel stacked full-frame back-illuminated exmor RS sensor and the dual Bianzi XR processor. Guys, when you examine an image taken on the A1, you're going to see that the colors are really improved over previous Sony cameras. The greens are deeper and slightly warmer. Now the yellows are also beautifully rich, and the blue tones are cleaner with less magenta hazing. Now additionally, images shot on the A1 have really superb dynamic range. I mean, this camera really shines here, especially when shooting in RAW. Now the JPEG also show nice detail with very little noise, even when shooting at higher ISO. ISOs. That's a nice feature because it allows you to really pull the details out of the shadows without ending up with a ton of noise. Now, I have spoken about this in the past with the two things that kind of bug me the most about Sony cameras. One being the ergonomics, which we're going to get to that in a minute, and the other being the menu system. I think the menu system in past Sonys, at least for my preference, were clunky. They were just a pain in the ass to navigate. This is a big home run. There are just 3 buttons that you're going to need to worry about to be able to get to where you need to, obviously after you hit the menu system. The front dial on the front, that's going to navigate you through the main kind of categories. This dial on the back is going to control your individual pages on the categories, and this right here, the dial right here on the back, is going to get you to the individual items itself. It is super, super intuitive. So Sony did a really good job with this. Now, one of the headlines with the A1 is a very capable video camera. After all, you're getting 8K video at 30p and 4K video up to 120p, but friend, there is so much more to that story. The 8K video is actually oversampled at 8.6K. So when shooting at 8K, video is recorded in 10-bit 420 XAVC HS format via HDMI. You also get internal 4K recording at 10-bit 422, and you can record 4K using MPEG-H HEVC H.265 codec. You can choose 16-bit raw output to a external recorder via HDMI as well. Other video features include HDR, HLOG video, 4K video using full sensor readout, Super 35 mode, real-time eye autofocus, and real-time tracking and active image stabilization. Now with a 1.1x crop. Now there's simply a ton of options for recording video with this camera. Now the Sony A1 includes no less than 11 picture profiles for stills and video. Now picture profile is basically a menu that allows you to change the characteristics of an image or video. Usually the most common types of changes you might want to make include color tone, contrast, adjusting graduation, and emphasizing the image edges. Now within each profile you can change all sorts of settings, including color profile, detail, gamma curve, and of course the advantage to all of this is that you can exert more control over the color grading process. Okay, as I mentioned a moment ago, the other item that for me has always been a deal breaker with Sony's is the ergonomics. Now, you're going to find here in the moment the ergonomics I'm putting on both as a pro and a con. We'll get to the con here in a moment. Now, with this particular category, I do want to really emphasize this is personal preference. There's a lot of moving parts to this. If you have big hands, depending on how you hold the camera and so forth, that's going to determine whether or not, obviously, the ergonomics is going to be an issue for you. The best thing I can say with regards to that is get to a store that has these and grab it for a bit. But that said, I never really, when I grabbed a Sony in the past, it just didn't feel right. There was always something missing. I didn't really feel like if I was holding this for a day along to the side, would it be something that I would feel comfortable with? And while there is a con to this here, the pro with how the camera feels is such a night and day difference compared to previous Sonys that I've held before. So again, Sony, great job. Now here's something that you don't hear too often, a camera being a jack of all trades. Well, guys, the A1 is really interesting in that it truly is a jack of all trades. You get impressive photo quality and tons of video options. Now this has the ability to shoot up to 30 frames per second and has a huge buffer, which makes it ideal for shooting like things like wildlife or sports photography. Of course, it's weather sealed, as I previously mentioned, to give landscape photographers that durability they demand. And so it can be used in the field or in the studio. And it does these things all very well, but is it a perfect camera? No, but if you're a photographer or videographer that needs a single camera to do just about anything that you may ask, this is a camera this camera is very well worth taking a look at. But before you dive into buying one, be sure you're aware of some of the pitfalls. Now, I know a moment ago I spoke about the ergonomics being a pro for this camera, but I also put some fine print there or mentioned that this is going to be on the con list as well. And I'm gonna repeat it again. The ergonomics, this is personal preference. I have big mitts. For me, how I carry around camera is I always have it like this, so it's ready to bring up and shoot. I use a strap, but most of the time when I'm out, I'm always holding it regardless whether I have a strap on. And these days I don't use a strap too often, so I'm always holding it. And here's, in my opinion, this camera does not get, it's close. If it wasn't for the lens here, this thing would be a rock star. But if you have other lenses, now for the last month, I've had just the 2470 2.8 G Master Sony, and it has this, it's thin here and it flanges out. So I suspect for people like me that have lenses that follow that same kind of footprint here, you're gonna run the same problems. Because if you look at this here, when I'm walking around, my knuckle is, let's see if we can get it in there, is always hitting that edge of the lens there. And while this part where my hand is wrapping around feels really good, the knuckle does it, you can actually see it starts getting indented there, and it feels raw after a few minutes. So that's the only kicker with this. If you have small hands, probably won't even be an issue. But for me, my personal preference and how I carry around a camera, this does not feel as nice as an R5, R6, or even the Nikon Z7, which I found to be very nice in the hands. And you can see from this angle right here, this is what I was talking about. See how my knuckle is just hitting right up against the edge of that lens there. So if the lens was a little bit more narrow, or if this came out just a little bit here, people with big hands wouldn't have to worry about their knuckles getting knocked up against the lens there on a regular basis, especially when you're carrying this around. But other than that, boy, I mean, it really does feel really good on the hands though. Sure, it's possible for the A1 to achieve a burst shooting rate of 30 frames per second with the electronic shutter, but the threshold is only met under certain conditions. For example, you have to be shooting either JPEGs or in lossless RAW mode to get the 30 frames per second. Additionally, you can only shoot 30 frames per second with certain lenses. Now, if you don't have the right lens, or you aren't shooting in JPEG or lossless RAW mode, you can still shoot up to 20 frames per second in many situations. That's still incredible speed, so I'm kind of nitpicking here, but it's a bummer that the 30 frames per second isn't more widely available. Even if you can't shoot 30 frames per second all the time, the A1 is a unmistakably very, very fast camera. To accommodate that speed, it has a huge buffer, and guys, up to 400 JPEGs or 238 raw uncompressed files. Now the problem is that it can take a bit of time for that buffer to clear, in some cases up to a minute if you're shooting with a fast SD card. Now a secondary problem is that when the buffer is clearing, you can't use the menu functions. Instead, you have to sit around and wait. Now I know a minute isn't a long period of time in the grand scheme of things, and you won't have to wait long if you use a CF Express Type A card, but still, you might find yourself waiting around for the A1's buffer to clear. The A1 has the ability to surpass its 50.1 megapixel resolution to create ultra high resolution images. Now this is utilizing pixel shift technology, where you can take a series of photos anywhere from 4 to 16 images, and it can be combined to create almost a 200 megapixel shot. Yeah. However, this cannot be done in camera. You have to process the images in post-processing. Now this isn't a huge deal if you know what you're doing, post-processing program of your choice, but it is still an output of additional time on your part. Now, as good as many of the video features are with this camera, the one thing that is lacking is a better LCD screen. For starters, the screen only tilts up and down. It doesn't articulate like the screen on my R5 or R6 does. So if you're shooting a lot of video, having an articulating screen moving out like this is an absolute must. Not only that, the A1's LCD is old and offers just 1.44 million dots of resolution. Compare that to the 2.1 million dots of resolution in the R5 screen. Now the R5 screen is also bigger at 3.2 inches compared to the 3 inches of the A1. Alright guys, the elephant in the room, and if I don't mention the $6,500 price tag as a con here, you guys are going to hand it to me down in the comments. So, calling a spade. This thing is $6,500. That's a lot of green. That's a lot of cash. When you compare it to some of the other options out in the marketplace, and I'm not saying this camera is a head-to-head competitor to all these other cameras out there, but it's a big leap from a price standpoint, and is it worth the $6,500? Would I go out there and buy $6,500? Would I spend $6,500 on this camera? If I wasn't so heavily invested with Canon, and if the ergonomics with the lens hitting my hand there wasn't an issue, yeah, I probably would. You know, I'll have to think about it. It's very tempting, but it's when you look at it, this rig right here with the body and then the lens, just this setup right here after tax is about $9 grand. That's a grip. That's a lot of cash. In my opinion, I think for my shooting behavior and what I look for, I think the R5 is a better find. The R6 is a better find. So as you can see, there's a lot to love about the Sony A1 if you're a photographer, a videographer, or both. But there's obviously a few concerns I have with it as well. Now, most of these negatives I've mentioned are, I'm nitpicking things, but when you have a price tag like this, you reserve the right to want a camera that is as close to perfect as possible. Now, I'll have more videos on the A1 coming up soon, so stay tuned for more details about this truly incredible camera. Now let's discuss our current giveaway. 3 lucky winners will be awarded one of the following: f-stop Toyota series camera bag, Haida M15 filter and filters, and of course the $100 Adorama gift card. As always, entering the giveaway is really simple. Step 1, like this video, subscribe to our channel. Step 2, leave a comment below. In fact, the more of our videos that you watch and leave a comment on, the more chances that you have to win. So get watching some of our other videos and leave some comments. Step 3, register on PhotographyTalk and introduce yourself in the form. Now, if you registered on the site and introduce yourself during one of the last giveaways, you're still eligible to win. But as I keep saying over and over again, swing on by, say hello, we would love to see you. Now, for complete details on the giveaway, including how to say hello in the form or how to register on PhotographyTalk, check out the description below. Good luck. Well, if you notice, I'm speeding up a little bit here because my R6 is overheating. So guys, we're going to make this very quick here. So if you found some value with this video, do me a favor, hit the like button. If you're currently not subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe button. And while you're at it, hit that bell to be notified each time that we come out with a new video. Friends, I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to turn this camera off before it completely dies on me here. So you get out there, stay healthy, and create your best shot.